Stop pretending you're a savior when you're nothing but a traitor, I snapped, my words slicing through the silence between us in this overgrown garden hideaway. As I glared at you, the forbidden lover who dares betray my best friend while I simmer in the shadow of my perfect siblings. Every stolen kiss in the dark tightens the noose around our collapsing family empire, I continued, my jealousy and rage mingling with the bitter taste of impending ruin. Believe this, your betrayal isn't just a sin, it's the first cut in what will be our ultimate downfall. Chapter 1. The Catalyst of Crisis. Lydia's heart pounded with quiet fury as she surveyed the boardroom. Her siblings had always excelled, leaving her feeling inadequate. Now, amidst the architects of her family's legacy, she struggled to steady herself amid personal and professional turmoil. Her mind buzzed with envy and longing, recalling the echoes of her siblings' successes. The looming crisis, not just a threat to the business but to their legacy, intensified her insecurities. Her father outlined the crisis: floundering investments, whispers of fraud, and a precarious market demanding bold decisions. Lydia's pulse quickened. This was a chance to prove her worth. As the meeting proceeded, Lydia's eyes met Julian's, her forbidden lover, whose presence disrupted her focus. His mischievous and pained look stirred memories and ignited new conflicts. The intersection of business urgency and personal betrayal felt orchestrated, yet his gaze promised understanding and rebellion against a system demanding cold logic over emotion. Determined to assert herself, Lydia challenged proposals marginalizing her ideas, weaving personal insights into strategic decisions. Her words defied a history of invisibility, asserting she was more than a shadow of perfection. Throughout, her mind circled back to Julian. His presence was a catalyst for rebellion, making her question the boundaries of loyalty and desire. Was she ready to risk the fragile stability of her family's empire for a forbidden connection? The meeting reached a crescendo with a proposal demanding an all-in decision, a gamble with the family business. As votes were cast, Lydia sought Julian's eyes, finding a silent challenge and a beacon of defiance. The tension promised an uncharted journey, urging her to step beyond confining boundaries. As the meeting concluded, leaving the future uncertain, Lydia remained seated, thoughts a tempest. The crisis was not just financial, but a chance to redefine her identity, perhaps daring to defy expectations of family, loyalty, and love. Julian's gaze locked with hers, a silent dare urging her toward an unknown, thrilling future. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Secret Garden. The relentless clamor of the boardroom had long faded into a distant echo as Elena found herself stepping through the ancient, ivy-clad archway into the secluded garden. Here, the world seemed to transform. What once had been a ruthless battlefield of decisions was now a sanctuary of quiet rustlings and soft shadows. The garden was a hidden retreat with sprawling, overgrown hedges, a gentle stream meandering between clusters of wildflowers, and time-worn statues that whispered secrets of another era. Elena's heart, heavy from the betrayals and endless demands of corporate warfare, began to beat a little more peacefully in this ephemeral haven. A few moments later, as the late afternoon sun bathed the garden in a hushed glow, Elena's solitude was interrupted by the subtle crunch of gravel underfoot. His presence was familiar, yet perilous, a forbidden lover whose gaze was frequently filled with unspoken defiance and deep regret. Gabriel, with his clothes slightly disheveled from an escape of his own, arrived like a wisp from another life. Their eyes locked in that instant, and the forbidden magnetic pull between them surged even in the silence. Elena's guarded smile wavered as Gabriel softly greeted her by name, his tone carrying both tenderness and an underlying note of melancholy. The garden, with its tranquil corners and hidden alcoves, bore witness to their clandestine meeting, a reprieve from the unyielding demands of their daily lives. Together they strolled slowly along a winding path lined with delicate roses that had seen many secrets before theirs. Every step brought with it a combination of relief and tension, as if the earth itself was urging them to share more than mere words. Their conversation, at first tentative and cautious, gradually steered into territories that both excited and endangered them. Gabriel's voice dropped to a confidential murmur as he hinted at the turmoil that bound him to Elena's closest confidante, her best friend, a person whose warm smiles once offered trust, but now echoed with betrayal. "Elena, there are things you haven't heard yet," he admitted, his eyes avoiding the direct glare of the afternoon sun. "My ties with her, they're not as simple as they seem. I am entangled in secrets that reach much deeper than what either of us can imagine." His words, laced with a mix of regret and vulnerability, added a new layer of complexity to the already fraught connection between them. In that moment, every word was heavy with meaning, and Elena felt as though she stood on the edge of a precipice, caught between loyalty and passion. The garden's protective embrace allowed the pair to lower their defenses. A soft breeze stirred, carrying away the rigid formalities of their daily lives and replacing them with an honest simplicity. As they found a secluded bench beneath an ancient oak, the conversation grew softer and more intimate. Elena's mind recalled earlier instances, the hushed meetings behind closed doors, the shared smiles in moments of overwhelming pressure, and now this secret interlude felt like a fragile promise of something more than the sins of the corporate world. Gabriel reached out with a trembling hand, an invitation as potent as a whispered vow. The magnetic charge between them intensified, and Elena found herself leaning into the warmth of his touch. Their faces inching closer, the garden held its breath as they teetered on the brink of an irreversible crossing. With the soft rustling of leaves as a backdrop, their lips finally met in a tentative yet lingering kiss. It was a moment that encapsulated every conflicted emotion they'd long harbored, a blend of forbidden desire and the weight of impending consequences. The kiss lingered, both an affirmation of their undeniable chemistry and a quiet admission of the complicated web weaving their lives together. For several heartbeats, Elena allowed herself to lose track of the relentless ticking of time. The kiss was tender and fraught with uncertainty, carrying promises of passion yet warning of heartbreak. In the cool, hidden enclave of the garden, every whisper of the wind spoke of secrets too dangerous to be fully revealed. Even as the kiss deepened, a sense of foreboding emerged. This stolen moment was a defiant act against the established order, a rebellious reaching out that threatened to shatter the fragile boundaries between personal desire and the established loyalties of her former life. As the kiss broke, their eyes slowly met again, now shimmering with the unspoken acknowledgement of their shared risk. Elena allowed herself a wry smile, a mixture of wistfulness and a dawning resolve to accept the consequences of loving someone who was as much a stranger to the stain of his past as he was a mirror to her own hidden vulnerabilities. Gabriel's expression, stained with apprehension and hope, underlined the complexity of their entanglement. He softly promised that in the still, sacred moments of the garden, their truths could be shared without judgment, even if only for the fleeting moments before duty, and destiny pulled them back into the relentless storm of their everyday lives. Reluctantly, as twilight began to spread its veil over the labyrinth of fountain and ferns, they parted with a lingering sense of anticipation and sorrow intermingled. The secret garden, having witnessed the meeting of two souls poised on the brink of change, now held the echo of their whispered confessions, and that forgotten, trembling kiss. Elena tucked the memory safely away, acknowledging that every tender meeting with Gabriel was a step deeper into a maze of emotions that might, in time, prove impossible to escape. Walking back toward the looming reality of boardrooms and power struggles, Elena's thoughts remained fixed on the garden's isolating charm. A hidden world where whispers could be shared, trust could be temporarily restored, and the heart could dare to love despite its own scars. The sanctuary, with its quiet conspiracies of nature, was now forever tainted with the knowledge of a love that defied the measured beats of corporate life and the irrevocable betrayal lurking within their midst. Chapter 3. Torn Between Loyalties. The morning light filtered weakly through the window of the quiet study, offering no warmth to the icy tension that had taken over the room. Nora sat at her desk, her hands trembling as she reread the message on her phone, its words echoing in her mind like a memory she couldn't erase. The message was from Daniel, her best friend, a storm warning she had tried desperately to ignore until the unrelenting tide of feeling surged forth. He confronted her with eyes filled with a mix of betrayal and pain, his voice low and tremulous, as he accused her of fraternizing with the one person he had sworn never to see again. "Nora, I trusted you above everything," Daniel had said, his words slicing through the quiet of their usual sanctuary. "How could you let yourself get involved with him, You knew how much it meant to me and still you did it." His voice was raw, the hurt in his tone mingling with years of deep-seated devotion to the friendship they once nurtured. Nora felt as though the ground was slipping away beneath her feet, torn apart by a sense of inevitable betrayal that she had never intended to deliver. She tried to explain, her words a feeble protest against the maelstrom of emotions swirling inside her. "It's not as simple as you think, Daniel," she whispered, the weight of two worlds, her heart and her duty, making each word a battle in itself. Yet Daniel's disappointment was palpable, a chasm opening between them that would be hard to mend. In that moment, the boundaries of love and loyalty blurred into a painful haze where every memory and promise was drenched in regret. Later that day, under the relentless hum of boardroom discussions and the crushing pressure of a family legacy on the brink of collapse, Nora found herself caught between mandates and personal desires. The board meeting was in full swing in the expansive glass-walled conference room, where tension and stakes were high. Across the polished oak table, family members and business associates exchanged terse glances, their voices a steady stream of calculated decisions that left no room for sentimentality. The crisis involving their flagship project had escalated, and whispers of betrayal and financial jeopardy lurked in every corner of the discussion. As Nora listened to the vitriolic debates of her relatives, her mind was a battleground of conflicting loyalties. The weight of her upbringing and the responsibilities it imposed clashed with her emerging desire, a desire that was as dangerous as it was forbidden. Her heart pounded, much like the rhythmic knocking of her disjointed thoughts, each beat a reminder of the secret she harbored. She remembered Daniel's eyes and the silent promise of their shared past, the promise of loyalty that now felt sullied by both love and ambition. Every word uttered in the boardroom reminded her that her personal transgressions could topple the empire her family had built, leaving behind a trail of shattered legacies and broken trust. During a pause in the meeting, Nora stepped out into the dimly lit corridor for a moment of respite. The air was cool, and for a fleeting second, she allowed herself to be vulnerable, to truly feel the weight of her inner conflict. Shadows of the past, filled with memories of family disputes and moments of unspoken jealousy, crept in. She recalled how her younger self idolized family unity, only now to see that the bonds she once held dear were being stretched thin by choices that defied expectations. The secrets she guarded, the intimacy shared with her forbidden lover, had always been a source of exhilaration and a well of guilt tangled tightly with her heritage. A surge of conflicted emotions pulled her back into the labyrinth of the family business. Nora knew that every decision made in that room was a double-edged sword. Each strategic move took her one step closer to safeguarding the legacy, yet simultaneously edged her further into a moral quagmire of deceit and desire. The board's relentless focus on profit margins, crisis management, and damage control stood in stark contrast to the vulnerability she experienced in the soft echoes of her own heart. Were these calculated tactics really the most important things, or was there a far more human cost hidden beneath the veneer of modern enterprise? In a quieter moment after the meeting, when the polished floors reflected the weary eyes of those who had given everything to the cause, Nora found a secluded corner in the building's vast atrium. She closed her eyes, inhaling the stale air scented with ambition and regret, and tried to sort through the fractured pieces of her identity. The company had been a cradle of both her dreams and her nightmares, a place where her family's expectations forced her into roles that were not entirely of her own choosing. Emotions long suppressed bubbled up now, revealing raw insecurities and quiet longing for freedom. It was in that space of solitude that she finally allowed herself to accept the inevitability of her dilemma. She could no longer choose one allegiance over the other without sacrificing a part of her soul. Her thoughts shifted to the man who had ignited this internal tumult, a figure who embodied the tantalizing mix of danger and passion that had disrupted her carefully constructed world. The intimacy they shared was both a rebellion and a rescue, a dangerous escape from the relentless obligations that tethered her to the legacy of her family. And yet, in the quiet aftermath of the confrontation with Daniel and the emotionally charged board meeting, she couldn't help but wonder if her pursuit of personal happiness was worth the inevitable loss of trust, both in herself and from those who had always believed in her. In that charged moment, as the dusk settled softly outside the atrium windows, Nora realized that the path forward was no longer clear. She was irrevocably torn between a sense of duty that commanded her every waking moment, and a passion that defied the very structure of her world. The reconciliation of these conflicting parts of her identity would require sacrifices that she wasn't yet certain she was ready to make, and the uncertain future loomed ahead, a future painted with the hues of risk, regret, and the thrill of forbidden love. Chapter 4. Risking It All. The boardroom was tense that morning, its sterile walls echoing the power plays and hidden agendas that had long plagued the family empire. As senior executives exchanged cold, guarded glances, our protagonist Helena sat at the far end of the table, mentally recalibrating her focus. The crisis threatening the foundation of her family's business had reached a fever pitch, and with it, the stakes in her own heart rose dangerously high. Helena's careful, measured words during the previous board interactions had not gone unnoticed. Yet beneath her steadfast composure lay the shock of a personal turmoil, the forbidden love that blossomed quietly in the shadows of corporate warfare. Today, however, all her internal conflicts converged, the need to rescue the family legacy, and the desperate longing to hold on to the one person who had nonetheless mended her broken trust. As the meeting plateaued into political maneuvering and subtle sabotage, Helena exchanged a silent agreement with her forbidden lover, Marcus. Their eyes met across the room briefly, an unspoken pact forming in that split second a secret alliance that transcended the merciless boardroom game. Though they were on opposite sides of the corporate battlefield on paper, in that charged moment their loyalties interlaced. They both recognized that the turbulent boardroom battles were a mere reflection of the personal risks they were daring to take in each other's arms. With whispered words barely escaping her lips, Helena promised, "We have to act now, more than ever." Marcus's nod, firm and resolute, echoed the determination in his eyes. Before the next round of meetings, Helena and Marcus managed to retreat into the safe cloak of darkness, beneath the sprawling ancient oak planted in one of the mansion's forgotten corners, a secret garden that had borne witness to nearly every clandestine meeting in the past. The secluded garden, shielded by cascading ivy and brilliant moonlight, became a sanctuary where the urgency of the corporate crisis softened in the face of raw, uninhibited emotion. Here, surrounded by blooming night flowers and the gentle hum of evening life, their souls could speak freely. In the hushed enclosure of the garden, with anticipation thick in the air, the two lovers discussed their plan to rescue the faltering empire. Marcus outlined his meticulously gathered evidence and ingenious strategies, daring maneuvers that promised not only to secure critical alliances within the boardroom, but also to expose the duplicity festering among their rivals. Helena listened intently, her mind racing with images of betrayal and redemption. The strategies were risky, fraught with potential peril, yet every plan spilled forth with the passionate hope of salvaging, not just a company, but a life built on legacy and love. In those minutes, as the moon watched above, and each whispered word weighed like a solemn vow, the boundaries between the professional and the personal gracefully blurred. It was then that Helena felt the weight of her past betrayals, and the guilt that had so long haunted her. Recollections of momentary lapses and choices that had cost so dearly mingled with the bitter taste of sorrow. But, in Marcus's supportive gaze, and the safety of the secret garden, she found an invigorating blend of vulnerability and bold defiance. Here, emotions intertwined with resilience. "I'm risking it all," she murmured, more to herself than to him, as if summoning all her inner strength. "Every gamble we've taken in the boardroom mirrors the risks we're taking in our hearts, but I cannot let my past mistakes dictate our future." Marcus placed a tender hand on her shoulder, his grip a silent pledge of unwavering support. In that charged silence, as the silver luminescence of the moon etched delicate shadows on their entwined figures, Marcus leaned in. The tension of strategy, fear, and hope melted away as their lips met in a passionate kiss. It was not a mere merging of bodies, but of hearts reinvigorated by shared purpose and determination. That kiss carried the gravity of every secret rendezvous and a promise of every promise made in the whispering dark of the night. It was both an act of defiance and a profound commitment to the survival of what they both held dear, to their personal redemption, and to the daring journey they had embarked upon together. The kiss broke away as they reluctantly pulled apart, both aware that the fleeting moment of intimacy had cemented their pact even further. In the secret garden, the risks of the boardroom were no longer abstract terror, but tangible, immediate challenges that they would tackle as a team. The air around them vibrated with renewed determination as they retraced their steps into the storm of corporate intrigue waiting just outside the garden's protective embrace. Their alliance forged in the secret shadows, and inspired by a love that dared to challenge the norms, became their shield against the creeping collapse of the family business. Walking back to face their destiny, every step was imbued with both trepidation and daring optimism. Helena's heart pounded with the echo of that daring kiss, and Marcus's eyes shone with fierce resolve. Together, they had dared to face not just the boardroom battles, but also the fragility of their own hearts. The formidable challenges that loomed ahead in the boardrooms would test every fiber of their beings. A high-wire act woven between calculated risks and corporate strategy and the raw, unbridled passion they found in each other. Yet that night, in the secret garden, they had chosen to risk it all. It was a declaration that their shared future was more precious than any corporate power play, their love a powerful countercurrent to the forces that sought to tear apart family bonds and trust. As Helena finally stepped back into the fray of boardroom scheming the next day, the memory of that serene evening lingered, a private sacred energy that bolstered her resolve. Regardless of the treacherous maneuvers unfolding in the gilded room, the covert alliance with Marcus provided a strength that no amount of corporate duplicity could erode. Their journey had taken a risky turn, one where personal sacrifices and professional ambitions entwined in an eternal waltz. And with their hearts affirmed by both a secret garden vow and the courageous kiss of passion, they were ready, together, to face whatever trials lay ahead. Chapter 5. New Beginnings. The boardroom hummed with tense expectancy as the final meeting commenced. The CEO's voice, once brittle with doubt, now resonated with a determined tone that filled every corner of the room. As the protagonist, Elena, stepped forward to address the assembly, her gaze swept across the sea of familiar faces, each one reflecting echoes of past betrayals, hidden ambitions, and unspoken loyalties. It was a defining moment, one that would chart a new course not only for the company but for her own life. The murmurs of dissent softened as Elena cleared her throat. In that instant, her voice became a bridge between fractured alliances and hopeful reconciliation. With a measured clarity, she began to untangle the knotted narratives that had haunted the board for months. "We have always believed that truth is the cornerstone of progress," she declared, her tone both compassionate and firm. She detailed the facts, laying out the financial discrepancies, personal misappropriations, and layers of secrecy that had undermined not only the organization's stability, but her own trust in those she once considered allies. One by one, confessions began to surface. A hesitant manager recounted hidden agendas, and a senior executive admitted to compromising corporate decisions driven by personal vendettas. Even as the board members wrestled with painful realizations, Elena's steady presence forged a path toward healing. Her resolve, nurtured not only by intense personal struggle, but also by an unexpected love that rekindled her spirit, served as the beacon guiding everyone through the murk of mistrust. The energy in the room shifted as old wounds were reopened in order to be healed. Elena, while addressing the faults of the past, drew parallels with her own journey. She recalled her days of uncertainty, the moments when every decision felt like a shadow cast by regret. But now, standing before the board, she intertwined those personal trials with the professional crisis at hand. "My own journey has taught me that forgiveness is not a concession, but a prerequisite for reinvention," she said, her words resonating with genuine vulnerability. As she continued, seemingly insurmountable obstacles began to dissolve. The revelations that tore through the room left the board members visibly shaken, but gradually transformed the atmosphere from one of accusation to one of accountability and renewal. Nothing could mask the slow emergence of trust, a trust that had been battered. It was finally ready to be rebuilt on the solid foundations of truth. Elena's perspective on leadership had evolved. This board meeting was not just a crisis to be managed. It was an inflection point in which justice, responsibility, and shared hope converged. Outside the sterile walls of the boardroom, a secret garden lay waiting, a lush space that had once been the silent witness to whispered confessions and clandestine promises. Earlier in her arduous journey, Elena had found solace among its vibrant blooms and tangled ivy, a place where the real and the ideal fused. Now, when the final echoes of the boardroom standoff had faded, she returned to that sanctum of renewal. The garden, bathed in the mellow hues of a setting sun, bore the marks of both neglect and tended beauty, a fitting reflection of the past few turbulent months. In a quiet clearing, where a weathered stone bench faced a wild tapestry of roses and honeysuckle, Elena found him, Adrian. His eyes, deep and understanding, held no trace of the doubts that had once clouded their connection. Instead, they mirrored an acceptance of the complexities that life had thrown at them both. In that shared silence, the weight of recent events melted away, replaced by the tender promise of healing. Their relationship, born out of mutual struggle and nurtured by candid revelations, had come to embody hope itself. Elena's heart, buoyed by newfound inner strength, reached out. There was no grandiose declaration required, only a simple act of connection that transcended the past's bitterness. Drawing Adrian into a close embrace, they shared a kiss that was as gentle as the breeze that whispered across the garden. It was a kiss that spoke of forgiveness, a final exclamation point at the end of a tumultuous chapter. In that single heartfelt moment, the promise of new beginnings was etched indelibly into both their lives. The garden transformed around them, as if nature itself celebrated their decision to trust again. The evening dew clung to leaves like tiny gems, a reminder that pain and triumph often coexist to yield beauty. While they lingered, wrapped in each other's arms, the future felt not only possible, but inviting. Elena realized that every difficult conversation, every tear shed in remorse, and every burst of resolve had been essential steps along the path to self-discovery and transformation. Back within the corporate corridors, news of the day's breakthroughs began to circulate. The board left with a new mission to reshape their policies, with Elena's courageous lead inspiring further changes. Colleagues and former rivals alike started to see each other in a new light, one that was more compassionate, more accountable, and ever so ready to embrace restored trust. In that final act, Elena not only reconciled estranged allies and put an end to the echoing heartbreak of deception, she also reclaimed a part of herself that had long been dormant. It was a renewal that extended from the sterile boardroom to the vibrant wilderness of the secret garden, a dual testimony to the healing power of truth, vulnerability, and love. As night fully claimed the sky, Elena and Adrian slowly parted from the garden bench, each carrying a quiet confidence and the serene certainty that the past had finally been laid to rest. In this moment of liberation and hope, they both embraced the adventure of a future unburdened by old grievances and comprised instead of possibility.